Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I'm happy to see everyone this morning. I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Manuel Romero. I know everybody knows Manuel, author of Mi America, and we have really enjoyed Manuel as a member of the GSHA Utah chapter. Of course, he is our speaker committee. And we've had the privilege of having so many speakers that Manuel has lined up for us. So, Manuel, I know that you're talking today about, I believe Hispanics are in the Catholic Church. And anyway, I'm going to let you introduce um, your talk today. So, everyone, please welcome Manuel Romero.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you. And thank you all. Good morning. Hope everyone's doing well. So I gave this presentation a few weeks ago at the Utah Catholic Conference. And so what I want to do is I created a video. It's my first attempt at video AI. And so it's about a 15 minute, I think it's about 15-minute video that will highlight the basically what it is our Catholic faith from Spain to Mexico to New Mexico to Utah. And so what I'm going to do is, and let me just preface this by saying that I will be polishing up this video as I learn more, and I hope to have it on my website, a nice polished version in a few weeks, so you'll be able to see a much cleaner version then. That's my hope. I have some things going on, but anyway, so that's my hope. So I want to ask you for if you'll if you'll kind of ignore some of the glitches that are in there. I haven't learned how to remedy that yet. So I hope you will bear with me with some of those glitches. But what I want to start off with is I'm going to show this video that I created on our Catholic faith. And then what I'm going to do is I have a keynote presentation after that, which I'm basically going to fill in the blanks, a lot of what was covered in the video, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper in that. And then I want to leave some time for questions. And Armando, feel free to take anything you want. Okay, I'll do it all for a couple of beers. But so anyway, Albert and I tried to, we played with this a little bit yesterday, and I think we have it. Albert, let's hope, let's cross our fingers. So what I'll do is let's go ahead and start this video. And then, as I said, I will I have a keynote presentation after that, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so let's cross our fingers and see what happens.
You have to share your screen, no?
I'm doing that right now.
Okay.
I'm hoping to do that right now. You tell me if it's working.
That's working.
Catholic faith traveled from Spain to Mexico to New Mexico to Utah. Our ancestors did not come over on the Mayflower to go through Ellis Island or come over on slave ships from Africa.
Yes.
We didn't even cross the U.S.-Mexican border because, well, there was no border. Our ancestors were here long before America was America. When my father relocated his family from New Mexico to Utah, we did not just bring our belongings. We brought with us our language, our music, and our religion that has evolved over the last 1,700 years. When Santiago or St. James brought Christianity to Spain, it was a faith my parents and their parents before them devoutly practiced as Catholics and recited prayers that reached as far back. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. If you are Catholic, you know the rest of this prayer. Some 1,000 years later, on October 19, 1469, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castilla married, bringing together the Christian kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, laying the foundation for the modern kingdom of Spain. Spain became a devout Christian land. On October 12, 1492, Christopher Columbus landed on a distant Caribbean island, marking the beginning of the Spanish claim over the New World. Subsequent explorers pursued riches, religious expansion, and fame in their quests. The conquest of the Americas represented an extension of Spain's historical battles against the Moors, who had held Spain since 711 AD, leading to the unification of Spain as a devoutly Catholic nation. Spain expanded its empire in the Americas and planted seeds in New Spain. The Church of Spain believed they were saving the pagan indigenous tribes and encouraged their soldiers to mix with and marry the indigenous people whose land they now occupied. This gave rise to a new and growing race of people who would eventually outnumber the population of Spain, the mestizo. Religion was one of the most lasting institutions the Spanish brought to the Americas. The Catholic Church of Spain dominated the kingdom with the same authority as the monarch, each depending on the other for legitimacy and control. The church and its missionaries formed the Americas as absolutely as the kings and
It's
queens.
the oldest church in New Mexico.
It is unlikely one could have survived and flourished without the other. Catholicism became the official religious institution of most of the American continent. The conquistadors spread both their faith and their language as they expanded their empire. Peasants and missionaries, like the conquistadors before them, were lured onward by stories and legends. The most famous told of an Indian named Juan Diego who lived near Mexico City. In 1531, he allegedly reported seeing a vision of the Virgin Mary, and he brought to the church a tilma or cloak on which her likeness had miraculously appeared. The image of the dark-skinned Mary became the iconic Our Lady of Guadalupe. Unlike the images of fair-skinned Jesus Christ, his disciples, and the saints, this was a woman who resembled the indigenous peoples meant to worship her. The Virgin of Guadalupe has been used as a powerful symbol in revolutions. Labor movements and public service organizations have adopted her name while carrying out community work. During the Mexican War of Independence from Spain in 1810, her image and name were used as a battle cry known as El Grito, Long Live Our Lady of Guadalupe, first uttered by Father Miguel Hidalgo y Castillo. The image of the Virgin was also used widely during the civil rights movement, especially in the farm worker struggle led by Cesar Chavez in the 1960s. But her image represents much more than a battle cry. From this time forward, her apparition is commemorated on December 12th and marks Las Mañanitas. As Catholic children, we were woken early in the morning every year to take part in a celebration to honor the Virgin Mary. Today, our family continued the tradition. Every year on December 12th, Latino Catholics throughout the Americas celebrate Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, the Virgin of Guadalupe. The celebration, Las Mañanitas, includes a reenactment of the apparition of the Virgin to a Mexican peasant, Juan Diego, in Tepeyac, Mexico, on December 9th and 12th, 1531, when she left her image on his tilma or cloak. In 1598, 9 years before the establishment of Jamestown, Juan de Oñate and some 600 settlers established the first permanent European colony in North America at San Juan de los Caballeros, along the banks of the Rio Grande. It became the capital of New Spain. By early 1599, the capital had been moved to San Gabriel del Yunque near Ocay Owingue, also known as San Juan Pueblo. Oñate intended not only to explore the region for the Spanish crown, but also to convert the Indians. Once they arrived at their destination, Juan de Oñate and the Franciscans erected a large cross, and Oñate declared, "I want to take possession of this land in honor of our Lord Jesus Christ," on this day of the Ascension of our Lord, April 30th, 1598. They held a mass in the honor of Nuestra Señora, the Virgin Mary, followed by a feast to celebrate the occasion. This first Thanksgiving in this land precedes the feast celebrated by the Pilgrims in 1621 by 23 years. Plus night. One other tradition or informal institution that would impact the Catholic faith of Nuevo Mexicanos and that of our family were the penitentes. When the number of clergy was insufficient to meet their needs, The Nuevo Mexicanos created their own lay brotherhoods for
Penitentes.
conduct of religious services and related activities. In reality, what developed was a form of folk religion, which was often condemned by Catholic Church authorities who believed that because it was a secret society with overly fervid practices, it cast an unfavorable light on the church. All penitente ritual is extremely orthodox, so it's not surprising that many of their hymns, litanies, and oraciones, prayers, are traditional. An alabado from the opening words, alabado sea praise be, is a hymn in praise of the sacraments and can be found in variant forms throughout the Spanish-speaking world. In New Mexico, it has come to refer to any religious hymn sung during ritual observances, such as wakes for the dead or the saints, and for family worship. One can get a sense of the power, faith, and influence of the penitentes when visiting a small church in the heart of northern New Mexico.
That's a beautiful church.
The temple shrine in the United States is more sacred to Catholics, especially Latino Catholics, than the Santuario de Chimayo. El Santuario de Chimayo, a small shrine located in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains of Chimayo, New Mexico, has been a place of worship since before its construction in 1813. During Holy Week, more than 60,000 worshipers undertake a pilgrimage from throughout the state, some walking over 100 miles to the site. Some come out of curiosity, but most come hoping to find miracle cures for their physical or emotional pains, illnesses, or disabilities. It's amazing to watch thousands convene on the grounds of the holy site. A door at the left of the nave opens to a small prayer room with an amazing number of discarded crutches lining the walls. Above them, the walls are covered with photos and letters from people testifying to the healing power of the holy dirt, which is found in an even smaller adjoining room. The size of a walk-in closet, this room houses a tiny well called El Pocito, dug into the ground to hold the fine soil. La bendición. The blessing is another tradition we brought. Though the practice has faded over time, it is the practice of saying special prayers to ask for God's protection for traveling, a custom often mentioned in the Bible. Our family has honored the ritual ever since any of us can remember. Whenever any of us left on a long trip, we'd get on our knees to receive a blessing, asking for safe passage to our destination.
This happens every time we travel.
Grandmother, grandfather, aunt, or uncle. Various prayers are recited during the benediction, but they all ask for a safe journey. The following is a translation of a prayer recited in Spanish. May God bless you with every heavenly blessing and give you a safe journey wherever life leads you. May you find him there to protect you. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
That's his mom and dad.
Okay.
This is
Priscilla, your phone's on speaker.
Inside Loretto Chapel, located in Santa Fe, New Mexico, holds an important place in our faith. Our story begins in 1850 when the Vicariate of New Mexico was established under the first bishop of the territory, Bishop Jean-Baptiste Lamy. Seeing a need to educate the girls of the territory, Bishop Lamy sent a plea to Catholic teaching orders to open a school for girls. The Sisters of Loretto responded and sent 6 sisters to open the Loretto Academy. By 1873, the sisters were able to start the construction of a chapel. Unfortunately, the architect died before access to the choir loft was built. Given the height of the loft and the small size of the chapel, a staircase would have taken up too much floor space, thereby reducing the seating capacity to an unacceptably small level. Legend states that seeking guidance and help, the Sisters of Loretto prayed a 9-day novena to Saint Joseph, patron saint of carpenters. A novena is a special prayer said for 9 consecutive days. On the final day of the novena, a carpenter appeared with only a hammer and carpenter's square. He built what is now known as the miraculous staircase with simple tools and wooden pegs. When the staircase was complete, it is said that the carpenter disappeared without receiving thanks or payment. The sisters tried all local lumber stores, but could not find accounts open for supplies for their stairs. Some believe the carpenter was St. Joseph himself, while others believe that it was someone sent by Saint Joseph. What is known is that the sisters of Loretto prayed, and their prayers were answered. Our family's Catholic faith has been strong for generations. Attending Mass regularly, praying the Rosary daily, fasting, and attending Catholic school are all part of our people's heritage. After Mass or during catechism classes, we were often shown films about church history or events related to our faith, black and white movies about Juan Diego, Our Lady of Lourdes, or Our Lady of Fatima. In the story of Our Lady of Fatima, which takes place in Portugal in 1917, three children, Francisco, Jacinta, and Lucia, witness an apparition of the Virgin Mary and are told three secrets. One of the children, Lucia, became a Carmelite nun as a teenager, and our sister Anne had the honor of meeting her in 1974. Lucia died in 2005 at the age of 97 after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1846. The United States government established schools for Native American children, but education was otherwise left entirely to residents of the New Mexico Territory and the Catholic Church. The isolation of the Penasco Valley was a mixed blessing. While jobs were hard to come by and daily sustenance was a constant challenge, cultural traditions survived. The Nuevo Mexicanos clung to their Catholic ceremonies, Spanish language, and unique cuisine. An important tradition that came with us to Utah was the funeral ritual. Throughout the villages of north central New Mexico, when someone passed away, the church bells tolled to inform the community. This ritual was called doblado. If the villagers were not aware that anyone was sick and close to dying, the question was, ¿Quién se murió? Who died? During World War II, the bells tolled frequently around New Mexico. During the velorio, which lasted 3 days, friends, relatives, and neighbors stopped by to pay their respects, and dinner was served to everyone. Some stayed all night singing alabadas, and the rosary was recited several times. On the last day, our grandfather, Juan Manuel Romero, was loaded onto a horse-drawn wagon to be taken to the cemetery, followed by a procession of mourners. Family and friends buried the body themselves, and no one left until the last shovelful of dirt covered the grave. Afterwards, they were invited back to the house for coffee and a light lunch. For more than 350 years, the Romero Madrid family resided and survived in the Pensaco Valley. The 1950s changed all that. For the first time since our ancestors first arrived in north central New Mexico, the family relocated to the land of Zion in Utah. We were not strangers to Utah. Explorers from Spain's northern kingdom of Nuevo Mexico arrived in Utah in 1776. Franciscan fathers Dominguez and Escalante surveyed the region and wrote about the landscape and people they encountered. When our family, like the Archuleta, Chacon, Griego, Lopez, Martinez, Montoya, Sanchez, Trujillo, and Valdez families and hundreds of other Nuevo Mexicanos relocated to Utah, we brought customs and rituals with us. Perhaps no other New Mexico tradition has better stood the test of time than weddings. It's difficult to determine which rituals came from the Spanish and which rose out of the New Mexico settlers' isolation or were borrowed from the Pueblo Indians. What is certain is the strong Catholic tradition practiced by New Mexico Chicanos. It was the promise of a new beginning, the promise of land that brought our ancestors to New Mexico some 400 years earlier. This is what we brought. This is what helps identify who we are and where we come from, and continues to be a source of inspiration for not only our family, but for all those hundreds of families who were forced to leave New Mexico and Colorado in the 1930s, 40s, and into the 50s as a result of the theft of land and their inability to survive off the land our ancestors had settled centuries earlier. Our parents did not let us forget where we came from. We brought many of our cultural traditions with us. Baptisms, funerals, religious holidays, and weddings continued to be practiced in traditional ways. by our family and other Nuevo Mexicanos who migrated north to the land of Zion. The faith we brought to Utah with remains a big part of our life. All 13 of Rodolfo and Amelia's children were baptized and married. In the Catholic tradition, all 45 grandchildren were baptized, and most married in the Catholic faith, and most of the great and great-great-grandchildren were also baptized in the church. Everybody is looking for a sense of belonging and purpose. This is the Catholic faith that traveled from Spain to Mexico, to New Mexico, and that we brought with us to Utah. Okay, so what I want to do now is, like as I mentioned earlier, fill in the blanks, and let's see if we can make this work. Okay, are we okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you and we can see you
All right,
in the
so
presentation.
as I mentioned earlier, this is our Catholic faith we brought from Spain to Mexico to New Mexico. And as mentioned earlier, when my parents moved to Utah in the 1950s from New Mexico, where our ancestors had resided for almost 350 years, as I mentioned in the video, we not only brought our language and our music, but our Catholic faith. And again, so this presentation will explore the deep roots of faith and the evolution as we made our way to Utah. And to understand that, oh, that's what I was, oh, here we go. Okay. So to understand our Catholic faith, we first need to understand how it became part of our tradition. As mentioned in the video, about 1700 years ago, St. James or Santiago first brought Christianity to Spain. Up to that point, Spain had been part of the Roman Empire, and eventually when Constantine declared Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire in approximately 371, that's when the Roman legions, everywhere they went, Catholic or Christianity would follow. And thus we get introduced to Christianity is introduced to Spain. In 711, the North Africans or Moors, they occupied Spain for approximately 700 years until 1492. Under the Muslim rule, Spain was called Al-Andalus. And I really want to get into this, but I'm not going to in this presentation because what we'll see is just how many contributions were made as a result of the Muslim or in Muslim Spain during this time. And I can go into a whole series of things, but let me just mention a couple. This is where the first modern guitar is developed in Malaga, Spain. The sciences evolved. Some of the first universities, specifically music, in areas of music and science, evolved. And this would eventually lead or make its way to Italy, where it would give birth to the Renaissance. So they would occupy, the Moors would occupy Spain until 1492. Of course, we know in 1492, several things would take place. However, in about 15, I'm sorry, I'm messing up the date, but anyway, with the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabel, this would eventually make Spain strictly in 1469, when they married, this would unite Spain, making it official Catholic, making Catholicism the official religion of Spain. So in 1492, we know that when Columbus set sail for the New World, really didn't know what he had encountered, and called the area of the Americas the West Indies. By 1519, Cortez had come into Mexico and by 1521, he would defeat the Aztecs, the mightiest empire in the Americas. This would, in less than 100 years, Spain, or New Spain rather, would be converted into and would be called Nueva España. And within 100 years, almost all of the Americas were Catholic. And several events took place, however, during this time. Two events I want to speak about, and that one is a friar by the name of Bartolomé de las Casas. He was a wealthy landowner and was given what was called an encomienda, basically a plantation by the Spanish crown. However, he began to see the mistreatment of the Indians, and he would begin to turn against enslaving the Indians. And in 1551, him and another priest by the name of Sepúlveda, they argued before the Spanish crown and the Catholic Church, and the argument was this: do the Indians of the Americas have souls? Well, Bartolomé de Casas, he finally convinced the king of Spain, that in fact they do have souls. And this would lead to the eventual, the condemning and outline Indian slavery. However, who was going to do the work once the Indians were no longer able to be enslaved? Well, Bartolomé de Casas would make a recommendation he would regret the rest of his life. Why don't we bring some Africans to do the work as slaves? And after this point, so this is really when the slave trade really took off in the Americas, long before the slaves began to make their way into the 13 colonies. And again, so this would be a decision he would regret for the rest of his life. And soon, Bartolomé de Casas would become the first abolitionist in the New World, preceding that of the abolitionists of the Americas by 200 years. Now, this is very important for a couple of reasons. Perhaps the most important one is with that acceptance that the Indians had souls. So Spanish conquistadors and settlers were not only allowed to marry and blend with the natives, they were encouraged. Within 100 years, the mestizo would outnumber the Spanish in the New World. And this would lead to, again, the birth of a new ethnic group, the mestizo and the mulatto. The second important event that took place was the apparition, as we mentioned in the video, of the Virgin of Guadalupe, and to Juan Diego. Now, why this is important is because, for a couple of reasons, again, is because not only did she appear to Juan Diego, but she also spoke his language and looked like him. This would lead to an expansion of the Catholic faith throughout the New World with this apparition. So these two events are very critical in our history. Well, by 1598, a settler actually, he was a businessman. Juan de Oñate makes his way to New Mexico and up into the Española Valley. And this will establish the first permanent settlement in a European colony, rather, in North America. And again, as mentioned in the video, celebrating the first Thanksgiving. And again, I won't go too much into this, but what was interesting about Los Penitentes is that, again, it was a lay group that was formed by the people of New Mexico. And again, the big reason for the birth of the Penitentes was because there was not very many priests to carry out the rituals. And what was interesting to me is I remember I have 10 family members that I've researched that are or were members of Los Penitentes, and they would eventually build their own chapels. Now, understand that the Penitentes were condemned by the Catholic authorities because they didn't see them as they're kind of operating outside on the fringes of the Catholic Church. But what's interesting is again, several interesting things about these, the Penitentes, but I remember one of them, and I'm not sure how many of you know of family members who were part of this lay organization, but they would build their own chapels called moradas. And I remember as a little boy, in the little village of Rodarte, there was a morada by the gravesites, by the cemetery rather, and I remember going by there on Good Friday, and their chants, it sounded much like the Gregorian chants, scared the heck out of me as I walked by there. And as soon as I heard those chants, I took off. I ran home, scared to death, not knowing what they were all about. So the penitentiaries play a very important role in the Catholicism, and they also played a very important role in the cultural evolution of New Mexico. And in some cases, were very uh, influential politically. And I'm not going to go too much into the santuario because we already know about the santuario. What's interesting is that in 1813, a penitente by the name of Benito Abeta, he was working his land where he saw a light coming out of the ground. He began to dig, and in that he found a cross. He was puzzled, so he took that cross and took it about 8 miles west to Santa Cruz, and informed the priest there. So the priest put the cross up on the altar, while the next day it was gone. Benito, the next day, working his field, saw the light coming out again. And there again, he saw the cross. He took it one more time and took it to the church in Santa Cruz. The next day, again, it was gone. He did that 2 more times. Eventually, he convinced the priest and the bishop to erect this church in Chimayo. So again, playing a very important role. And as I said earlier, now the Pocito, and I'm not sure how many of you have visited the Santuario de Chimayo, but almost everyone that goes there will take a little vial of dirt with them. It's believed to be holy dirt. And as mentioned in the video, you'll see the testament to the belief that people had and the faith they had by the crutches that are on the walls and the pictures of testimony to the healing power of the dirt. And again, this is very powerful. Many people that I know, and I'm sure maybe that you know, have made their way and brought that dirt and have rubbed it on people with various illnesses and with prayer. So this is a ritual that continues, and it has continued for generations. And to this day, people who are introduced to this are very moved once they go there by the impact and the as you walk into the church, you can almost feel the faith coming through. So the other interesting thing that happens is this creation of the santeros and santos and retalvos. Santos are three-dimensional carved representations of saints, and retalvos are images of saints on flat panels. Now, the reason this is important is because when the church first arrived, the Catholic Church first arrived, and the Spanish first arrived in Nuevo Mexico, obviously not a lot of resources, not a lot of attention paid to them, but many of the people that were there, they wanted to create kind of similar saints and statues that were in the churches in Europe. Obviously, without many resources, they created their own art. And thus they created these retalvos and these santos that would, for example, adorn the churches throughout New Mexico with these. However, in after the Mexican-American War in 1848, when the French Bishop LeMay, he took over, he was not too impressed, and he began to take these down and actually put up kind of European-looking statues. However, many people still especially the santuarios, they still make a living out of creating these. And what's interesting about the santos is that people will pray to these santos when to pray for someone that is sick, pray for their healing. And what happens sometimes when that person is not healed, the people will take the santo and face it towards the wall as a punishment. So, and then I'm not going to go too much. I guess we run out of time. So we already talked about the Loretto Chapel. So I'm not going to spend too much time of that other than, and again, talking about our Catholic faith. Now, what's interesting about, I think that is really anyone who, particularly with roots in New Mexico, who came here, one thing that we find is that our Catholic faith is a huge part of our Catholic identity, and it continues to be. So with that, I'm going to close this presentation and then take some questions. Are we good?
We're good. I think a lot of people are on mute, so.
Manuel, this is Ed. Were there any penitentes in Utah, in Salt Lake?
That I know of, no.
So they're mostly just in New Mexico?
And in southern Colorado.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were very prominent in southern Colorado. They eventually made their way to southern Colorado and are and very prominent in that part of the state.
Are they still in existence?
Oh yes,
Yes.
I have a few friends and one relative that are still that are penitentes, and I see Lydia's on here. She probably knows a few penitentes in New Mexico as well, right, Lydia?
Oh, can you hear me? I'm not sure if I'm muted or not.
We can hear you.
We can hear
Oh,
you.
okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. Good morning, everyone. Yes, that's actually my father was a penitente, and currently I have a lot of friends that are penitentes. And the nice thing about them is they're called hermanos here as well. Whenever we have someone that passes away, the first thing that the hermanos do is they're the ones that host or do the rosary for everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're a penitente or whatever, as long as you're a Catholic member of the church, they will be the ones that will actually do the rosaries for you and help the family in anything they can. So yes, they're very prominent here and very active. A lot of them. We can gather the ones from Llano, the ones from Peñasco, Duarte, all of them together, Trampas. You can have 100 people here for a rosary of a very, very special person, so to speak. If everybody knows you or whatever, they'll all gather together. If not, it'll just be a handful from the church or the moradas around the general area where you're from. So it is a very active and still they still recruit a lot of them. We still have a lot of young men. It's so nice to see this young man joining. So I think it's not a dying thing by any means. I think it's quite active. Thank you.
And that's what really surprised me when I went down there for Good Friday, is just how many young people participated not only in the pilgrimage, but how many of them were either were penitentes. So many young people. That was very impressive.
I think the pilgrimage to Santuario on Good Friday is everybody does it every year. I mean, the roads, the news will always be saying the road to Santuario, be very careful because you have pilgrims walking on both sides. It's a very, what can I say, big celebration here. And then when everybody gathers at Santuario, it's quite amazing, the faith that is in the young people, so it's nice.
And what's taking place, what's interesting, is the almost exact same ritual is taking place at the very same time in the Philippines and throughout Spain and throughout Mexico on Good Friday.
Manuel, I was just curious, what about the penitentes or the rituals made the church so doubtful about them or not want them in the church?
They were critical of them because, first of all, many felt that they were kind of taking the place of the priest. Okay, even though, again, the reason that for their creation was because lack of priests in the area. So they felt that they were overstepping their bounds, if you will. Okay.
Okay.
And that was one of the reasons that they were condemned, is because, and also because they were a secret organization. There was, and that also made the church very leery of them. So primarily for those two reasons.
So it wasn't what they did necessarily, or the kind of rituals they did. It was who they were.
Who they were, but also because, again, obviously they could not conduct a funeral mass or weddings, but they were able to, again, recite the rosaries and, again, take the place where a priest, when priests were not available. And so, but again, primarily because it was secretive and was the big reason. And again, because the church thought they were overstepping their boundaries, as I mentioned.
I was just curious because my grandmother's family was from Guanajuato, Mexico, and her father used to practice self-immolation, the whipping, and I know that is frowned upon by the church, and that's why I was wondering if they did anything kind of thing like that.
Oh yeah, the self-flagellation was common, particularly in the early
Mm.
years. It doesn't happen, it doesn't occur too much. But what's interesting is you go to some of these churches, and you have little rooms outside in the chat and inside the church, little I'm not sure what they call them, but they're little rooms off to the side, and they have on the ceiling they're these beams are called vigas, and you can see all kinds of blood on those from people
Oh,
themselves, and the blood would splatter onto the vigas up on top. And you can see this in many churches throughout throughout New Mexico, where the vigas are just covered with blood from that self-flagellation.
oh,
So it is a very interesting. And again, if you've never been to one, I attended my brother-in-law's father's funeral, and the penitentes recited the rosary. It was a church in Las Trampas with one light bulb, and the rest were candles. And this was late in the evening. And as I said earlier, their rosary was almost like a Gregorian chant. It was both eerie and inspiring and
yeah.
spiritual.
Wow. Wow, that's really interesting.
Manuel, when did the Catholic Church change their um, perception of the penitentes and recognize the importance of having the penitentes in New Mexico and in Colorado even? When
Well,
did they recognize
that,
that?
that's a good question, because it's really a relatively current event, by the acceptance by the church, and it has to do more, and it really began to change in the 50s and the 60s and into the 70s. And it's interestingly enough, it was part of the civil rights, the Chicano movement, that began to highlight some of the cultural aspects of our culture. And at that point, the church began to see them more as a cultural phenomenon rather than a religious, and began to see them as playing a vital role. And they also saw how I want to say popular, but how accepted they were, and how many people followed the penitentes. So you begin to see that change and that acceptance beginning in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Prior to that, they were still frowned upon very much.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Manuel?
went to a funeral of Elizabeth Ortega's mother, and they had the penitentes sing, and it's beautiful. There's like a lyrical, really pretty hymns, and nothing I'd ever heard before. And it was in Spanish, but it was a very beautiful ceremony with the penitentes doing singing at the funeral.
Yeah, if you've never, and I'm again at funerals is where they're going to be more public, and it's really interesting. As I said earlier, when they do their chants, it's both eerie and very spiritual, because they remind you of just how far back it goes.
Manuel, this is Priscilla. I had the opportunity to see the penitentes in La Madera, and they were great. At our reunion, we actually sang some of the alabadas, and it was really spiritual and really beautiful. So the penitentes and the hermanos in La Madera are going strong.
Mhm. Okay.
Manuel, thanks for your presentation. I was interested, among other things, some of the technological stuff. The AI, are you using a specific program, and
Yes.
how do you just kind of give it prompts, and then do you have to put any images in there, or does the AI bring up all the images for you? Yeah, sorry.
Both.
Okay.
It creates the script, and then you have to fine tune it. And same thing with the images. It'll bring up images it thinks that are relevant, but you can replace those. And as you saw in some of the script, there were some bumps there, which I don't know how to correct yet. But it was not very difficult to do. And actually, I could have left it all up to AI to create
Right.
all images, and it would have been okay, but it wouldn't have been as relevant. But they do, as some of those images were created by AI, some I placed in there.
Okay. Did you use a particular program or just
Yeah, it's called Video AI.
video AI? Okay. All right. Thanks.
Manuel, can you close your presentation because I cannot see anybody?
Yeah, stop share. Do the stop share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, let's stop sharing. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, I know we have been talking about alabados, and everybody knows that Bill Gonzalez wrote 2 books in alabados. I do have the 2 copies, and you can get a copy at the Mary Library. And I mean, he spent 40 years uh, writing this book because he has the manuscript, the original prayers, and his work, these 2 works on Alabados, grant him to be a member of the Real Academia Española, which is again is a merit that not many people get. So yeah, if you have a chance, it's beautiful, beautiful prayers. And then I was thinking about Bill as a new Mexicano, right? So again, it's a great honor. Manuel, where did your family came to in the 1950s? Which area of Utah did they come?
We started off in Bingham,
Okay. Oh,
okay,
okay. Okay. Okay.
and then eventually made our way to Midville.
Oh, terrific. Yeah, because right there in the area of Monticello, where the New Mexicanos came through, they create the first Hispanic church in the state of Utah, St.
Mm.
Joseph, St. Joseph, right? Which again, it was turned down 4 years ago, unfortunately, but it was a beautiful, beautiful church. It was built by New Mexicanos, yeah.
You know what's sad about this research I've been doing, and Armando, I'm not sure if you can speak to this, but when I try to do the history of the Catholic Church in the United States, the Church of the Southwest or the Catholic Church, the Catholics of the Southwest or Nuevo Mexico are seldom ever mentioned. I tried to do a bunch of research and take it for example, when after the Mexican-American War ended in 1848, well, the majority of the people in the Southwest who all one day to the next became U.S. citizens, it almost doubled the Catholic religion in the United States, not mentioned in the history books.
Yeah.
Armando, where's that book available at? Bill's book?
Bill Gonzalez, let me see. I have the 2 copies with me. Uh, I'll give you the press that put it together. And he wrote it 2 years before he passed away.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Could you
I
send the
got a
link?
book.
In
What,
fact,
what,
his ashes were buried right there in a tree that is right there at the St. Joseph Church in Monticello. Yeah, but those 2 books are amazing. In fact, Manuel, the prayer that you did so beautifully is in the book.
Mm.
And I know that somebody said that was born in Guanajuato. Many of the prayers in the state of Guanajuato, Jalisco, especially at the time of the Cristeros, are alabados, which is again surprised me how these prayers were able to survive more than 300 years. And they went all the way down to Mexico. Manuel, you have done an amazing work. Really,
Thank,
I'm very, very impressed.
thank you. Could you send a link to, or maybe just where we can find that book, the Bill Gonzalez's book, because I would sure like to read that. So anyway, if you can send a link, or at least, or maybe just the title and where I can find it, that'd be I appreciate it.
Yeah, and in fact, he has another article that he wrote for Utah State Historical Society. It's called Monticello, the Gate of Christianity. And again, when you were talking, Manuel Romero, I mean, his image came so strong to me, especially for the rituals from the penitentes. And one of them was the quinceañeras, which again is taken up again in the whole nation. Yeah. So yeah, if you don't have the citation for, again, this article that he wrote in Utah State Historical Society, which again, Manuel, I think you should publish your work there with them.
Okay, I'm working on that after I finish my documentary.
It's so rich. So
Manuel, I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you for the presentation, and I hope I don't stir the pot here, but it could be generational. So I grew up in a very strict Catholic household, and it wasn't until I went to university that I learned a lot of the bad things that people in religious, you know, groups have done. And obviously, I think all of us are aware of when the Spaniards came through New Mexico. It wasn't a beautiful translation to, from indigenous cultures to Catholicism. So I'm wondering, if that's something that are you've addressed or you're going to address, or if you even are going to go that route. And I say that because when I learned that, my heavy Catholicism religion has changed, which is though interesting because even though I don't really follow the religion anymore, I very much still honor and respect the Virgin Mary. Like, she is a huge part of our family, and the Rosary as well. So I just wondered, if that's something you will touch upon, or if that's even something you want to address in this book, I guess, or in your work.
Yeah, and it's something you said something very interesting because where does our excuse me, where does our culture start and where does our faith leave off? For us, it's very challenging because many of us growing up didn't know the difference. And as I mentioned, I might have mentioned before, the first I was like 12 years old the first time I married. I met a non-Catholic Latino. I thought, how could that be? You can't be Latino and not Catholic. That was my perception at the time. Anyway, going back to your question, is I mentioned earlier about the debate between Sepúlveda and Bartolomé de las Casas in Spain in 1551. And one of the arguments that was that Sepúlveda argued that natives should be forced to convert. Okay. Bartolomé de las Casas, on the other hand, said, no, it should be voluntary. Okay. Unfortunately, many took the road of Sepúlveda and tried to force that Catholicism on people, which eventually would lead to the revolt, the Pueblo revolt in 1680, where became the most significant and only really major Native American uprising against a European power, where they threw them out, but only to return 12 years later, because by that time the natives, the indigenous of not only New Mexico but throughout the Southwest, had become too accustomed to that Spanish culture, the food, the agriculture, the horse, as an example. But so throughout history, ever from the beginning, there's we do have to address those atrocities committed by the Spaniards towards the Indians. And by the same token, we also have to recognize that many indigenous turned against other indigenous tribes in support of the Spanish. So that is something that we have to at least always keep in mind, that of the atrocities that took place, the forced conversions, but also there's kind of the two sides to that. Also the things that they brought. Again, the horse, okay, as one example, wheat as another example, and a variety of other things. So we can try and balance that between the atrocities and the benefits, if you will. But it is something that we do have to address, because it is something that's very important to our history, and to understand how controversial that was. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Manuel, along those lines, how do you research that? Like, how many, you hear stories about priests and nuns, what they did to the Indians way back, hundreds of years. And so, are the documentation, did the church keep records of how many Indians and children were taken away from their parents and that sort of thing?
Yes, there and again, it's something I didn't address in this presentation. That is a whole nother presentation. That is the Genízaro. And basically, these were Indians that were either captured during the raids. It was both Indians and Spanish on both sides, but primarily Indians who would be captured by the Spanish, and they would be assigned to households. In time, Indians became tribalists. They had no tribe. They were still Indian, but had no tribe, and they referred to them as the Genízaro. That is beginning to be more documented today. And the big reason for that is that the Spanish government and the Catholic Church are beginning to release some of these records and make them available to researchers. So you're beginning to see some of that, but it's only something that's relatively new. And Armando can probably address this better than I can in terms of the documents that are now surfacing that weren't available, prior to the 60s, for example.
Yeah.
Hey, Manuel, this is Frank Dominguez. On the chat box, I'm putting up some books that I have in my personal library, touching upon some of the subjects he talked about. And the last book I put up, I just finished reading last week, was Jack Forbes' book, Apache, Navajo, and Spaniard.
Uh-huh.
And this is just another perspective of, and he's Native American. And it's just his perspective on the encounters, specifically the Apache and the Navajos and the Spaniards, but he also brings in a lot of information about the Pueblo Indians as well. It's another good book to read to get a better understanding of our history.
Okay, yeah, and both for you and Armando, because for some reason I can't see the chat box on my screen.
Oh, okay.
But I would love to get those resources from both you and Armando, because again, this still needs further research. And as I mentioned earlier, I plan to do a update on the video presentation I just made.
Manuel, this is Albert. I saw those chats from Frank and Armando had mentioned stuff. I think we should try to get where we can get that information as far as the books and referrals, and we should be able to send it out to the members, because there seem to be a lot of people that are interested in that.
Can I suggest sending to Priscilla, to the email that sends out the links,
the invite, yes,
and Priscilla would be able to distribute those.
I would
I think that'd be great, and if we could maybe put on our Facebook page and stuff, that'd be great. And I was going to say to Ed Trujillo that there is an organization, and Frank might be able to expand on this a little bit more, as far as I think it's called Unbound organization that was set up.
Native Bound, Unbound.
Maybe, okay. Yeah, that talks about the really slavery, I guess, is what you'd consider it, where these Native Americans were placed into households, whether they were captured or they would purchase. Every year they would have big sales where they'd come in and they'd sell captured Native Americans. They'd sell them to Spanish households. So there's something on that starting to become, I think he started the organization about 4 years ago.
Yeah, Dr. Esteban Rael Galvez, right?
Yeah.
So is that a website, or what is that? How do I get more information on that?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull that up on another screen.
Okay.
So while you're doing that, this is very important. Again, this is something I didn't touch upon. We talked about the Genizaros, the tribalist Indians, is that the way that the settlers and the basically the settlers got around that was they would use the padrino system, the godfather system. So once they were baptized, once they were given to a family and baptized, they were considered part of that family. So it kind of legitimized that.
I just wanted to comment, no slavery system is good. But the difference between the American or when the Southern British or Americans started or had slaves, the big difference is that in Latin America, everybody had to be baptized. And where unfortunately there were abuses of that, but that also allowed slaves at times to buy their children's freedom at the baptismal font, because the owner or the master was the godfather. And so there was a little bit more freedom, if you will. They could have days off, go out and work. Whereas in North America, we see they're not allowed to, they form their own Christianity, but they're not allowed to have that. And they're pretty much kept segregated in the plantations because they are fearful of letting the slaves get together and have some kind of unity. But it's like I said, there's no good slavery system, but it really is a very different system in Latin America than in what we saw in North America.
And that one big difference is that they could buy their way out of slavery in the Spanish Empire, where they could not do that in the colonies.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, in the
Yes.
next journal, in the winter journal for Nuestras Raíces, I'll have a couple articles in there, and they do touch upon the slavery system, especially in the Parral records.
No.
So look for that.
Oh.
The other thing, Manuel, I wanted to mention is that in our last journal, George Sanchez wrote an article about the Thanksgiving controversy in El Paso. And did you get a chance to read that, and kind of
I
your
did.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I don't remember the year, but kind of these things were these masses and feasts were going on wherever the Spanish settled, right? In El Paso or and I believe that the one in El Paso precedes the one in Española. I'm not sure by how many years, but yeah, I did get a chance to read that, and only that, obviously in the United States, the very first Thanksgiving is not going to be celebrated that we know.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. In the way that we see, but it is interesting to see that there was a very similar ritual in that area, and that of the Pilgrims, right? So, but to the conqueror goes, the conqueror writes the history.
Yeah.
Right.
And it wasn't in English.
Yeah. And it was Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, just going back to what Monique said, the history is not as clean as we want it to be. And in fact, there are two books written on the slave trade in Utah, which is, again, to me, it caused me a lot of pain to read, knowing that our own people were the one hidden this slave trade, right? But it's part of the story. I think what is beautiful and what Manuel is doing is applying what is called syncretism, meaning bringing two types of, like he said, right? We need to distinguish between the religion and the spirituality. And I think that's what, Monique, you are referring to. But in this, in my understanding, he brings the Spaniard Catholic religion, which again was and it brings the indigenous spirituality. So out of that is the penitentes, which again is understood as popular religion, things that the official Catholic Church is not going to take.
Yeah.
Because again, the one in charge is the laity, not the clergy. But it's part of our reality. And you just talk about the celebrations of the Holy Week in New Mexico, in Santa Fe. Well, you want to see penitentes, my gosh. You want to see the passion of Jesus and the whole Stations of the Cross, as we call it. It transforms your life. But I think our history is the history of humanity. It's not clear. It's a mixture of results. And again, we need to bring that. The official book of the Catholic Church in Utah, probably, Manuel, you know that, The Soul of the Earth, don't even mention Dominguez y Escalante. Which is, again, I think what Manuel is doing is just interrupting the system and say, listen, we are here. And I think it's a beautiful contribution.
Thank you.
Well, this is a wonderful conversation, and it was fascinating, but unfortunately we have to move on. I want to give a thank you to Manuel. I didn't go to your presentation at the conference because there were so many, and I thought, well, he's going to present to us. So, but I don't know if I missed by not going to see that, but this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
You only miss my jokes.
Oh.
Well, that is the best part, Manuel.
Yeah, Manuel, I really enjoyed your presentation. I think we could go on for another 2 hours just talking and bringing up our histories and our area of New Mexico and stuff. So,
Albert, do you get any compensation for your your altar boy picture in the
I wasn't going to bring that up. Yeah, that's Manuel. It's from his family there. That's Manuel's nephew on his right, and I was on his left. So with that altar boy picture.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much. And I love all of the our visitors today that came on to hear this presentation. You're so welcome and thank you.